context, props, useNavigate, and useParams. WebDev Mobile Dev presents to you these four main ways of transferring data and states between React pages and components. Welcome guys to this new tutorial, and in this tutorial we are going to discuss the four main methods of sharing data or states between React pages or components. So this is a simple project I created, and here in our app.jsx we simply have our browser router serving us some routes. And if we check in our browser, just get this simple application with different pages, and each page implements one of the methods of sharing data between components or between pages in React. Now, when do you want to use context in your application to share data? You practically want to use context in your application to make data global. That's, you want all components in your application to have access to a particular piece of state or data, careless of how deeply nested or nested your application tree looks like. So even the most nested of components are going to have access to that data. That's the data state you are using your context to serve. So we're going to head over to this context folder, and generally to start using context you need to have a file which serves the context. And in this case, in this context folder that's using context, the file serving our context is this data context file. And in this file, if you take note, we're exporting two main things. So the first export is the data context itself, and this is what we're going to call in other components to have access to the state that this context serves to us. And we're also exporting this data context provider, and this is what is going to wrap up all the components in which we want this data to be accessible. So that's practically it for the context. So you create the context over here, you create the piece of state which you want the context to serve, and inside here we're passing on this piece of state, that's the books, to all the children of this data context provider. Then we're exporting the data context provider. So when we return over here to our app.jsx, what we're doing is we're wrapping up all the children of our application. That's practically all the components, because inside each of these routes we have these elements, and each of these elements are components. Each of these components might or might not have nested components in them in turn, but either way, in doing this, we are passing the state which this context serves to all these children components, and each of these components are going to have access to that piece of state. If you now head over to this data page.jsx over here, which is actually the page which is being rendered in our application, and is the page which makes use of this context. We're using this use context hook to consume our data context, which is imported over here. And when we do so, storing that in a variable, we can now get access to that book state which our context was serving. And now, since as that book state was an array of titles and authors, we're just mapping over this in an ordered list. So we're just mapping through the books to display their titles and their author. And that's how context is practically being used. So over here in the application, you see these just the titles and the authors of each of those books being displayed using context. And now to show that context actually can be used in any other component in the application, I'm just going to open another page, which is going to be this using props page over here. So this using props page, or this props page, sorry, if I return to our app.jsx, you see this props page is what is rendered when I head over to this route. So if I return back to our browser and hit up this props page, this is what is being served and the console is empty. But if I now return back to our code and try to paste this line in this props page, so I'm going to paste the line of code under here. And now if I save and come back over here, then refresh this, we now see we still get access to all these books over here, though it's in a different component or it's in a different child component. And that's to tell us that when we're using context, all nested child components in our application can get access to that context, provided we just consume the context over here with a use context. There's actually a lot more to context, such as maybe changing the value of the state. Let's say if you want to add a new book to this book state in different components of your application, using use reducers and all of that, but we're not going to see that in this tutorial. But we have a tutorial on React state management in which contexts are explained in detail, as well as other tutorials you can check out to get in zip with context. The next method is by using props And props is actually a very simplistic method of sharing data between two components, usually a parent component and children components. So if we return over here to this props page, you see we get this state over here of items, and this is actually the state we want to share between components. So we discover that over here in this return, what we're arranging is simply this div, and in this div we want to have this child component, and that's called the using props page. It's actually a page, it's actually called using props page, but it's just a component. And yeah, we actually want to have this children component for as many items there are in this items array. So what we are doing is for each item, we are passing that data to this child component for it to know what to serve or what to render to us. So now if we control click on this using props page, you see it's just a paragraph, meaning each child component is literally just going to be a paragraph, which on receiving the prop from the parent component, because this is actually how we receive the prop, you just destructure the prop using its name from the props. Because if we check over here back in the props page, you see item is actually the name we gave to this prop we are sending. So for each item, we are sending that item with the name item, and whatever the name you give here is what you are going to use over here in the child component to destructure and get access to that data. So we now know each item has a quantity and each item has a name, and using both of that we want to be able to display the statement in each child component. And if we check back over here in our browser, we just get this simple page with the parent component and children paragraphs, each receiving data from the parent component and displaying that data over here in the browser. So you literally want to use props when, as we said, you are sharing data from a parent component to a child component. So the next method we are going to look at is using the useNavigate hook, and we are now in this useNavigate hook folder. So typically what useNavigate is used to do is useNavigate is used to share data or state between two different pages in our application. So these two different pages are simply two different components, but unlike in the case of props, the component must not be in a parent-child relationship, so they can be completely two independent components in our application. Because if we check over here in our app.jsx, we're trying to share state between this navigation page and this using navigation page. But if you look over here, you see both pages are being rendered in our browser router. That's to tell us that both pages are actually independent pages, unlike the case where only the parent page is being rendered and the children components are being displayed in the parent page. So if we return back to our navigation page.jsx, you see over here we are creating this state, and as we said, is the state we want to share between the two pages. So when we create this state, actually we are getting the value of this state from an input field. So we have this input field which we want to collect the data, and on click of this button we want to send that data to the next page. And how do we do that? We simply have this onClick event listener. So the onClick event listener collects the text from the input field and calls this handle navigate function, passing in that text as a parameter. But before heading into the explanation of this handle navigate function, to use our use navigate hook, actually we have to start by setting up the navigate hook. And to do that, all you have to do is to import use navigate from React Router DOM. Then over here you initialize it to some constant called mine navigate. Then you can call this navigate constant over here. So it's actually a function, and it takes two parameters. One is the route to which you want to navigate, that's the page you want to navigate to, and you can pass in an optional state parameter, which is just an object with a state prop, and this state prop receives whatever data you want to send. So in this case over here, when we get our data from our input field, we want to send that data over here, which is going to be string data, to this page. And this page, if we check over here in our app.jsx, that's /useNavigate, /useNavigate takes us to this use navigate page over here, and in doing that we are going to be able to send that state to the next page. Just to call our attention to the fact that this data over here must not be string data. It can actually be any form of data in your application: JSON, objects, arrays, and so on. I think that is a very powerful method actually of sharing data between two components in React. Now when we send that data to the next page, how do we get access to that data? So we're going to come over here to the page which receives the data, and in this page we see that useNavigate actually works in couple with a different hook, useLocation hook. So both hooks are from React Router DOM. So the page which sends the data uses the useNavigate whereas the page which receives the data uses the useLocation hook. So in this page that receives the data, after importing your useLocation hook, you just instantiate that's an instance of the useLocation hook, and this instance of the useLocation hook is going to have access to that state property which we send over here, because over here we send this object with a state prop, and in this other page our instance of our useLocation hook is going to have access to that state property that we sent over here, and that's actually going to contain the data that we send. So when we receive that data, all we're doing now is we're displaying two paragraphs. The data I got from the useNavigate is this data. That's whatever data we sent over here, and it's going to display in this case since as a string data. But if you are working with objects, yeah, you would not want to do this. You want to do something else with the data. But practically, the data you receive, you can do whatever you want with in this new page. So if we check over here in our browser and we head over to navigation, we just get that input field. So if I type whatever stuff I want here, let's just say some data, and I click, you see the data I got from the useNavigate is some data. So if I return and type something that's whatever, and just click over here, still get that long domain text here, and see that we're actually able to share data between our two pages in our application. And yeah, that's actually it for the useNavigate hook. And you typically want to use it in parts of your application, like let's say if you have a details page in your application, maybe you have clickable components in your application, list items, and when you click, you now want to display a full details page about that particular item. Now, for the useParams method of sharing data between two components or pages in your application, it's pretty similar to using the useNavigate hook, because yeah, we're actually dealing with sharing data between two different pages, because here we have two pages, the params page which contains the state we want to share, and using params page which contains, well, it's actually the page which receives the data we get from the params page. And in this case, the pages are also independent pages, because if we check over here in our app.jsx, we see that we're serving the two pages, the params page and the using params page. So the pages are not really in a parent-child relationship. We're not calling one component in another component. Yeah, they're actually two separate components, and yeah, we're trying to share some state between the two components. So it's actually very similar to the case of the useNavigate hook, where we have same input field and same button, but over here the button is rather a link with an href property. So what we're doing is we're getting whatever value we type into this input field, and when we do that, we're sending that value now as a parameter in the link to this anchor tag. So in this anchor tag, we have this href property. This href property takes, it has a route or it has a path, and whatever that input text is, that's this state is, we want to append that to this path as a parameter. And how does it know it's a parameter? It knows whatever is behind here is a parameter, because that's how we define this route in app.jsx. If we return over here to our app.jsx here in this browser router, we have this /params with the colon, then data. So this data is the name of whatever parameter we want to attach in front of this /params. Meaning when our browser router receives a new route, so on click of this anchor tag, that's actually over here, on click of this anchor tag, when it gets this first part that is params, it knows to consider whatever is behind this /params as the parameter, and it names that parameter with whatever name we give over here. So in this case, it's going to name the parameter data, and when we actually go to this link, that's /params/data, we are going to be served this page. So if we control click on this page, we actually get the useParams page, and here we actually want to get access to that parameter. So we use the parameter's name, which was data, because we called it data over here in our app.jsx. So whatever name you give over here, we gave it data in this case, is the name you're going to use when trying to access that data from your useParams. So over here, you import the useParams hook and you destructure this data from the useParams actually. Then you can use that data in your application, same like in the case for using the useNavigation hook. Actually, that's it for using params. Over here, you just have this anchor tag in the href. You are adding whatever state you want to send as parameter, and you are getting that parameter here, and you can use it to do something in the next page. So if we head over to the browser, I'm just going to go back and come to the params section. You also get an input field with a button, and this button is actually the anchor tag. So I'm using Bootstrap to style, so it styles the anchor tag like a button. So if you just type, let's say, some data in the params and send this over, actually get that over here, some data in the params. Excuse the wrong spelling for data. So we get that some data in the params, and yeah, we actually see we're able to share data between those two pages by using parameters. I would like to also call our attention to the fact that the main difference between the useNavigate hook and the useParams is that when you're using params, the data you're sending must be in string format. Meaning if you want to send an array, you will be forced to stringify that array before sending it to the next page. And when you get that array in the next page, you'll be forced to pass it to be able to use it in this page. And a disadvantage also of using params is that whatever the parameter you send, you can actually see that parameter over here in your, because for example, if I type something and I press go to the next page, you see you actually get that stuff over here in, well, the route or the link to that page. So you might not want that to be visible in most cases. So that's actually one disadvantage of using use params. But apart of that, I think it's really similar to use navigate. So that's practically it, guys, for the four methods of sharing data or state between your real components: context, props, params, and navigate hook. And there's actually more to all of these methods, but in this video we're just doing kind of an introduction or presentation of all these methods. But feel free to check out other videos or the docs to be able to get in depth with any of the methods you need. So thanks for watching the video, and if it helped you to learn something new or to understand some new content, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you guys for watching.